It's been almost 2 years since I did the part 1 to this video. Here's what I looked like doing it 2 years ago. This might be the longest I've ever gone between doing parts in a series. Why did I wait this long? Well, just didn't feel right, you know. Every few months I'd try and feel if it was right to do a part 2, and it just wasn't. Today I woke up though and it felt just right. Here we go then. It's been a long time coming. My name is Danny Burke and this is the top 10 scary stories that are real, part 2. Starting off number 10 now, we have The Watcher. This is a very disturbing story from 2015 that will scare anyone who fears being watched by someone you can't see. And that's pretty much everyone though. A New Jersey family were terrorized after receiving 3 letters from someone who said they were watching the house. This watcher said they were put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. Another letter referenced the family's children, saying, "I am pleased to know your names now and the name of the young blood you have brought to me." Another letter simply asked, "Have they found out what's in the walls yet?" No thank you. The family filed a lawsuit against the previous owners of the house, who they claimed failed to inform them about the watcher before the sale, despite being aware of this individual. The family tried to sell their $1 million home but found that rumors had spread of the watcher and nobody wanted anything to do with it. In the end, they applied for a permit to tear down the house and replace it with 2 new ones. I'm not sure if the watcher would be too happy with that. Moving on to number 9 now, we have the reality show killer. That's the nickname that was given to Rodney Alcala, a serial killer estimated to have murdered upwards of 130 victims. He earned his nickname because of his 1978 appearance on the Dating Gamer TV show. Here's a clip from that, and while you watch it, bear in mind that he was halfway through his murder spree and nobody at the time suspected a thing. The knowledge about him makes that very uncomfortable to watch.
What's wrong with morning, afternoon?
Well, they're okay, but night time's when it really gets good. Then you're really ready.
Prosecutors said that Alcala toyed with his victims, strangling them until they passed out, waiting until they revived, and then repeating the process. Over the years, it's thought he took more than 1,000 sexually explicit photos of women and teenage boys, at least one of whom he murdered. On this dating show, he was paired up with a woman to go on a date after the show, but luckily, she never went on the date because she got strange vibes from him. Sometimes you really should just trust your instincts about a person. She was very right. Next up at number 8 now, we have The Toxic Lady. This is the bizarre story of Gloria Ramirez, an elderly woman from California. On February 19th, 1994, she was rushed to hospital with a rapid heartbeat and a drop in blood pressure. Upon arrival, she could hardly breathe and was answering questions in incoherent sentences. Doctors knew that she had late-stage cervical cancer, but these symptoms didn't seem to make sense for the 31-year-old. No drugs seemed to stabilize her. Nurses noticed a strange, oily sheen over her body. Took a blood sample. Her blood smelled like ammonia, and there were manila-colored particles floating around in the blood. Then it got really strange. Nurses started fainting around her. One of them woke up and found that she couldn't move her arms or legs. 6 people were unable to treat Gloria because they were becoming nauseous, fainting, or experiencing this temporary paralysis. Gloria died that night. A special team in hazmat suits found nothing to suggest why people were being affected by her body in this way. The official explanation for her cause of death was kidney failure brought on by late-stage cervical cancer. The explanation for the staff fainting was given as mass hysteria. Many people didn't buy these explanations though and feel that there are some very creepy unexplained factors involved with the story of the Toxic Lady. Next up at number 7 now, we have The Spooky House. This one comes from 2006. 2 girls from Worthington, Ohio decided to visit a local home known simply as The Spooky House. It was run down, covered in overgrowth, and situated right over the road from a cemetery. You'll notice I didn't say it was abandoned though. That's what the girls thought, but they were very wrong. 41-year-old Alan S. Davis lived there with his elderly mother that he was caring for. Now he was a recluse who had thwarted off intruders before. He had a rifle as protection, and when he heard the girls coming outside, he fired a few warning shots because that usually worked. This time though, one of the shots struck 17-year-old Rachel in the head. Somehow Rachel survived. The story spread everywhere. Some people were outraged and thought Alan was mentally ill. Others said he was well within his rights to protect his own property. He was sentenced to 19 years in prison, and the girl luckily made a full recovery. What do you guys think of this story? Can you even believe it happened? We've got a lot more scary true stories to come though. Moving on to number 6 now, we have Mercy Brown the Vampire. This story comes from New England in the late 1800s. People back then believed that members of the public were dying from consumption. We now know it to be tuberculosis. At the time, its cause was unknown, known, so there was a lot of mysticism around it. It was thought that the first infected member of a family was draining the life force from their living relatives, functioning as a sort of living dead type character. Those who died from consumption were exhumed from their grave and examined. If their body seemed too fresh, they were deemed to be vampires who were draining the life force of the living. Mercy Brown was a girl who was the first of her family to die. Her family didn't believe in consumption and did not want her body exhumed. The villagers insisted though, scared that they would have their life energy drained next. When they went to dig up her body, they found signs of fresh blood. The body had also turned over by itself in the grave. The villagers panicked and burned her corpse. They then took the ashes from burning her heart and mixed that with water. They then took Mercy's brother, who was suffering from consumption, and made him drink the ash water. He died 2 months later. A gruesome end to a very creepy story. Next up at number 5 now, we have the COWCHILLA school bus kidnapping. When parents put their kids on a school bus, they expect it to be a safe place. That's what the parents in this story thought so too. In 1976, 26 children were heading home from their second to last day of a summer school in COWCHILLA, California. They were all aged from 5 to 14, returning from a field trip to a swimming pool. On the way, the driver stopped to see if a car that had broken down on the road needed any help. Suddenly, 3 masked men stormed onto the bus with guns. They drove the children and bus driver around for 11 hours before eventually stopping at a quarry. They then loaded them into a buried van with a little bit of food, water, and some mattresses. The kidnappers went off to make their ransom demands, but the phone lines were too full from media calls and families looking for their children. In that time, the bus driver stacked up the mattresses, allowing them to climb up to the top of the quarry and escape. Amazingly, all of them were fine and lived to tell this terrifying tale. Moving on to number 4 now, we have Open Water. That's the name of a 2003 horror movie, but not everyone knows it was actually based on a true story. In 1998, Louisiana couple Tom and Eileen Lonergan went on vacation to Australia after completing a 2-year tour of duty with the Peace Corps. They went for a scuba dive through the Great Barrier Reef. They joined 18 other divers at the St. Crispin's Reef. After a while there, the time came to return to the surface. The diving instructor counted everyone and then they returned to the boat. Somehow though, he miscounted. As the boat left, Tom and Eileen were still underwater, just in the ocean. Nobody even realized they were missing until their belongings were found on the boat 2 days later. Then, a 3-day search began. Eventually, they found a diver's slate inscribed with a message. It read, Monday, January 26, 1998, 8 AM. To anyone who can help us, we have been abandoned on Agincourt Reef by MV Outer Edge 25, January 98, 3 PM. Please help to rescue us before we die. Help. That message was all that was found though. It's thought they were actually eaten by sharks in the open water. Their story inspired a horror movie, but perhaps the original is an even scarier tale. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the Russian grave robber. In 2012, a suspected grave robber in Russia was said by police to have made 29 life-size dolls from mummified female corpses. Local historian and cemetery explorer Anatoly Moskvin was arrested by police who were investigating the grave desecrations that had been going on in the area. In his house, they found brightly dressed dolls, their faces and limbs covered in cloth. At the time, they couldn't determine if every doll contained human remains. They did confirm, however, that the remains belonged mainly to girls or young women and they had been dressed in clothes taken from the corpses. Police also found photographs and nameplates taken from headstones, as well as instructions for making these dolls and maps of cemeteries in the region. It was almost like he was preparing a sort of manual for others to follow in his footsteps. Next up at number 2 now, we have the bandit who wouldn't give up. This is the tale of Elmer McCurdy. He was a troubled man born in 1880 who had a love for nitroglycerin, a very explosive chemical. He would use it to break into people's homes and steal from them. He even used to rob trains. One day though, his dangerous obsession caught up with him. In 1911, he and 2 friends tried to rob a train carrying $400,000. Men discovered it was actually just a passenger train though. They only got $46 out of the people on board and 2 bottles of whiskey. The police were on their way, so Elmer holed up in a barn with the whiskey. He was ill and quite drunk when police showed up to claim the $2,000 reward on his head, and he ended up being shot and killed. Now it gets weird though. His body was taken to a funeral home where the owner embalmed it with a preservative that kept his features intact. Months went by and the embalmer received no payment from Elmer's family for his work, so he put the body on display to try and make back his costs. The body became known as the bandit who wouldn't give up. People came from all over to see it. Carnival owners offered huge sums of money for Elmer's body, but he refused. 5 years later, 2 men claiming to be Elmer's brothers showed up. The embalmer handed over the body to them. They weren't actually his brothers, they were carnival owners. They took Elmer's body on tour for 7 years before the carnival was sold to a man called Louis Sonny. When Louis died, the body was placed in storage. The body didn't crop up in the history records again until the 1960s and 70s. At one point it was left hanging inside an amusement park. Can you even imagine seeing that? The body was rediscovered by a film crew in 1976, and the following year he was buried, 66 years after he died. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Porthole murder. This is a story of English actress Eileen Gibson. In 1947, the 21-year-old was on board the Durban Castle, a ship heading to England from South Africa. She had recently appeared in a production of the play Golden Boy. Tragically, she never made it home. When the ship was 90 miles off the coast of Portuguese Guinea, the young actress was pushed through a porthole into the ocean after being sexually assaulted by James Cam, the ship's steward. He did not deny this act to the investigators. During the investigations, several women came forward to say how Cam had sexually attacked them on 2 previous voyages of the same ship. He was sentenced to death but managed to get life in prison due to a loophole. After being paroled, he went on to assault 4 more females, including a 13-year-old girl. He was then put in prison for life. He was released in 1978 and died a year later. Well guys, I hope that was worth waiting almost 2 years for. If it wasn't, then perhaps I can do a part 3 a lot sooner, maybe in like 2 weeks if I feel like the time is right. If it doesn't, well, I'll see you in part 3 in about 2 years. Let me know either way. Thanks for watching as always guys. My name is Danny Burke and I will see you all in the next video.